So you will need a lot of endgame resources to upgrade the best gear in Horizon Forbidden West and become way more powerful, which in turn will also make things a lot more easier and interesting for you. Luckily, in this video I will show you everything you need to know about getting the high-end loot that you need from crafting materials, upgrades and a lot more. So let's begin. Let's begin with a couple of resources that you can get very easily from just one simple type of vendor, which are the Salvage Contractors, and they sell two types of resources that you will need. One of them is the Ridgewood, which is basically used in crafting most of the arrows in the game. And if you're like me, you're going to hate farming for Ridgewood after a certain point in the game, which is why I recommend just buying it outright from any of the 4 Salvage Contractors in the game. Now you can buy about 200 of these at a time, but if you deposit it in your stash after buying it, you can go ahead and rebuy the full stash of 200 once more and pretty much repeat this as much as your pockets can handle it. Obviously you will need some money for that, but it's definitely worth it if you're in the end game, are sick of just farming out in the wild and have plenty of cash at hand to afford this. Now this also brings us to the second type of resource that this type of vendor sells, which are the legendary and epic upgrades, and you will need these for most of the high-end outfits and weapons in the game when you want to upgrade their ranks. Well, you need processed metal blocks for that, and there is a really awesome early on farm that I'm still using way into the late game, and that's going to be located in the Daunt region. There's going to be a scrounger site right here, right below this relic ruin in the same area, and most of the time this will spawn 2 apex scroungers, which means they have higher chances for more valuable resources. Each one can give anywhere between 2 up to 5 ancient metal blocks, but most of the time it gives like 4 or 5, so realistically speaking you're getting anywhere between 7 to 10 every single time you're doing it. Now to reset the fight, you simply have to go to the nearby campfire and just fast travel for free, for example in this case to Chain Scrape since it's nearby, and then just teleport back to that relic ruin and you can go ahead and repeat the same farm over and over again. It doesn't take more than 10 minutes to get about 50 of these if you're doing it properly and obviously have a PlayStation 5 or at least have the game loaded on an SSD. But moving on to number 2, let's make your ammo crafting a lot more efficient, and you can save a lot of Ridgewood and other resources when crafting arrows and other ammo by not crafting it out in the wild, but rather going at a workbench instead. And you will need the workbench expert as well, which is a skill in the hunter line, but it is totally worth it. Like for example, the advanced hunter arrow, which I find myself using quite often, costs about 10 metal shards and 5 Ridgewood by default to craft out in the wild, but if I go at any workbench it only costs 7 shards and about 3 Ridgewood, which over time and especially as you reach more into the end game will definitely play a role into saving those resources for when it's actually needed. It also works for the explosive spikes and some of the other high-end bombs or ammo in the game, and it's totally worth it to use so because you're going to save a ton of these materials that you normally waste into crafting. But moving on to number 3, let's talk about Coil and Weaves. Now you will need these for weapons and armor slots to further buff damage or defenses, or a combination of both of these. And of course what I recommend in this case is to hit the hunters and the stitchers. Now the hunters that I recommend are located in Thornmarsh and Maw of the Arena, and in my experience sell some of the best coils in the game. Specifically the one in Thornmarsh will sell some of the most amazing ones in the game, including up to legendary quality. Like some of these have instant elemental effect chances and they can be quite awesome, but there's also an epic one that gives you a 25% long range damage if you play like from really far away, so I definitely would suggest to go ahead and jump onto one of these. Meanwhile the one in the Maw of the Arena does sell a lot of these coils with bonus explosive damage, so if you enjoy the spike thrower you can immediately buy 2 of these epic quality and just slap them on that for even more increased damage on your explosions. Now as far as weaves go, there's going to be a different farming method that I will talk about towards the end of the video, but what you need to know is that, at least in my experience, most of the vendors in the game don't seem to sell anything worthwhile. So if you do know any vendor or location that does sell high quality weaves for your armor, totally let me know down below in the comments. In the meantime, for the farm that I'm about to prepare you for, you will need quite a bit of healing, and healing crafting berries are a pain in the butt to go ahead and farm, kinda like the Ridgewood. So instead of again wasting time collecting them by hand, again go at a vendor. In this case, you can visit any herbalist, as most of them in the game will sell you about 30 berries each. My favorite spot to do this in is probably the Bulwark. You can go ahead and purchase about 30 of these from the herbalist over there, and you can immediately like just deposit them into your stash, which is a few meters away from the herbalist in the same area. If you want an even earlier alternative, there's one right here in the Hidden Amber in the desert area. Again, one of the herbalists is outside of the room. You can go ahead and buy the stash from him and then deposit it in the box inside of the room next to him. It's again quite fast and quite early in the game for thousands of berries that will definitely be helpful, as you will be doing a ton of healing later on in the game. And also on a similar note, another quick tip that I have for you is in regards to shelters. Now you will need one of the main features of the shelters, which is to advance time manually and faster, because shelters give you access to a sitting area, which if you stay on, you can just advance the time to either morning, afternoon, night, and so on and so forth. Besides, they also give you access to your own stash and the crafting bench, but as I've said, that advanced time mechanic is what you're looking for right here, because this brings us to the next point on the list. And to fully upgrade legendary gear, you will need Apex machine parts like the hearts and whatnot. Unfortunately, the game doesn't do a great job at explaining how you can find these, and if you create a job, it's not going to work that well because it will indicate pretty much an unknown location. Reason being is because this is not a matter of where you find these spawns, but rather when you find these spawns. And Apex machines will spawn pretty much like in the first game, which is during nighttime, or at the very least the highest chances for that is during the nighttime. This is why I said that those shelters will come in handy, because you can immediately jump into like the nighttime and go ahead and farm into any of the usual spots, because the usual machines will now actually become Apex versions, and they will also be pretty much guaranteed to spawn like that during the night, at least in my experience. Now Apex machines are way stronger and durable, and you'll see them by their distinct purple accents, but also if you scan them, they will be revealed with the Apex terminology. This was, by the way, the main way in which I was farming epic quality weaves in the game, and especially since they seem to have the highest chances to drop from Apex machines rather than regular versions. At the very least, that was the case in my experience. This also brings us to a final crafting component, which are the creature nerves. And you will know these are annoying because they are actually more difficult to find than the Apex parts, even though technically speaking they come from the typical version of the same machines. So the reason is that because they actually drop if you break off the parts that contain them. And there's also an RNG component, which is the fact that they usually seem to have around 15 to 20% chance of dropping rather than being guaranteed. That's why I fully suggest to go ahead and check the creature info and see exactly which of these breakable parts you need to take down in order to have the chance of acquiring one of these nerves. But there's a final alternative to that, which makes things a lot easier, and that is to just turn easy loot in the custom difficulty setting in the main menu. If you turn the easy loot on, it's going to do exactly what it says it does, as in it's going to remove the mechanic that makes you lose items if you don't detach parts from creatures. So in this case, you can just right away destroy the creatures, do not care about their parts, and they will still have the chance to like reveal those items upon their death straight from their loot pool. And that is kind of it with most of the endgame farming that I'm doing right now to fully upgrade my gear. If I missed anything, totally let me know down below in the comments. In the meantime, we're trying to reach 400k subs, so if you want to join a community of really awesome people, or if you want to like show your support, you can do so by subscribing to the channel and activating that notification bell, and I'm gonna see you guys in the next video.